Very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. This is Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and on the show, as usual, we bring you the latest news from across the continent, and we do have our topic of discussion this afternoon, and that has to do with some of the forgotten African conflicts that have been experienced, that have lasted for years in this continent, that nobody seems to be talking about right now. I know the Ukrainian, conflict has continued, and that sort of has topped the headlines across the world. But still, we do have some conflicts in this continent: the Ethiopia-Tigrayan conflict, the Nigerian conflict, the conflict in Cameroon between the government and the Anglo-speaking region in Cameroon, and others from across the continent, including South Sudan, Sudan, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and many more, and of course Libya. And nobody seems to be giving this conflict the kind of attention they deserve in line with trying to finding solutions for them. Not even the African Union. It has now been caught up in that war between Russia and Ukraine, and we see every day the Western leaders really trying to drag the continent into that conflict. But so we shall look at that. But before we get to that, I'd like to bring us up to date with other news that are making headline from across the continent, and we will start with Ethiopia. And Ethiopia has allowed Boeing 737 MAX airplanes back to its airspace. The aviation regulator has said 3 years after one of its national carrier jets crashed shortly after takeoff from Addis Ababa. All 149 passengers and 8 crew members aboard the Ethiopian Airlines flight from the Ethiopian capital to Nairobi in Kenya died. The Ethiopian Civil Authority said it lifted the ban after being satisfied with the improvements in the plane's design and the airline's pilot training program. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration cleared the planes to resume flights in November 2020, but ordered mandatory pilot training and modification of flight computer. And we go to Nigeria, and mass burials have taken place in Nigeria's Plateau State for the dozens of victims of Sunday's deadly attacks in several villages. At least 150 people were killed in the latest wave of attacks by armed gangs. As the victims were being buried in the mass graves, people are still searching for more bodies outside the villages where the attacks took place. Most of the dead were young men and children. Many of them were shot dead as they tried to escape the attacks. The burials took place amidst tears and shock in these rural communities. The raids on at least 4 villages in Kanam area in Plateau State were some of the worst in Nigeria for many months. The atrocities the authorities have not given the specific number of people that died, but residents and traditional ruler have told the BBC that more than 150 bodies have been recovered, dozens of homes were burned down, and hundreds of people displaced. And people, mainly women and children, continue to flee on neighboring towns and villages. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reached out to the African Union for support against Russia's aggression and requested to address the continental organization. Mr. Zelensky called Senegalese President Macky Sall on Monday, and the conversation touched on the EU statement in February that called for an immediate ceasefire and a return to negotiations. African nations have showed disunity in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Senegal was among 17 African countries that abstained from a vote at the United Nations on a resolution demanding that Russia ends its military operation in Ukraine. In the telephone conversation, Mr. Zelensky informed Mr. Sall of Ukraine's struggle against invasion and heinous crimes of the Russian aggressor. According to a tweet, Mr. Sall is the current president of the African Union, and he did acknowledge the talks that him and Mr. Zelensky's request to address the African Union. And the European Union is strengthening relations with Nigeria as it seeks to diversify sources of its natural gas imports in an attempt to reduce reliance on Russian energy. Nigeria is the 4th biggest liquefied natural gas supplier to Europe. At least 40% of Nigeria's gas is currently exported to Europe. The EU seeks to cut the use of Russian gas in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Its diplomats visited the Nigerian state-owned oil company on Monday for meetings on increasing cooperation in the energy sector. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation chief executive assured the European delegation that the company was keen on increasing gas supply to the global market. Nigeria authorities say the country has a proven natural gas reserve of 209.5 trillion cubic feet as at January 2022. Revenue from oil and gas account for about two-thirds of Nigeria's funding. And then Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi has announced a major gas deal with Algeria, which promises to reduce his country's heavy reliance on Russian imports. Under the deal from this autumn, increased gas supplies will be sent through the Transmed undersea pipeline, which links Algeria to Italy via Tunisia. Italy buys the vast majority of its natural gas from overseas, with 40% of its supplies coming from Russia. Speaking while on a visit to the Algerian capital, Algiers, Mr. Draghi said his government had signed a preliminary agreement on energy cooperation with Algeria. And then we go to the DRC, where at least 30 people have been killed during 2 days of attacks by gunmen in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Red Cross now says. It happened in Ituri province, which along with neighboring North Kivu are under official state of siege in an effort by the government to stop the attacks by dozens of armed groups. The attacks are thought have been carried out by the Allied Democratic Front, ADF, one of the deadliest rebel groups operating in the region. They are brutal. Some of the victims have been found tied up. Others have had their throats slit. Homes were torched and property looted. In December, more than 1,000 Ugandan soldiers crossed into DRC for what was meant to be a joint military operation to defeat the ADF. But despite promises of progress, the group has continued to carry out frequent attacks on vulnerable communities. In North Kivu, another rebel group called M23 has recently relaunched a rebellion seizing villages, adding to the security crisis. Head over to South Sudan, and 2 members of parliament walked out of parliamentary seating on Monday after the speaker denied them a chance to inform the August House about the ongoing clashes in Unity State. Honorable Badik Dak Weir, representing Unity State in the National Assembly, walked out after the speaker denied him a chance to inform the parliament about a petition by some youth from the Unity State on the ongoing clashes in Lear. Honorable Anok Adhiar, who hails from Lake State, also walked out of the sitting on Monday in solidarity with his colleagues. They boycotted the sitting of the submission of Constitution-Making Process Bill 2022 by the Minister of Justice, Ruben Madol Arol. The frustrated lawmaker, who hails from Unity State, rose up during the sitting and wanted to inform the parliament about the ongoing clashes in his area. And still staying with South Sudan, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs submitted the Constitution-Making Process Bill 2022 to the Transitional National Legislative Assembly on Monday. The bill is expected to provide this for the establishment of the legal framework to govern the process of a permanent constitution-making process. It also aims at creating a permanent structure for the country that will pave the way for the conduct of general elections by the end of transitional period. It will also guarantee good governance, constitutionalism, rule of law, human rights, and gender and equality. However, the process has been delayed for nearly 8 months since the formation of the unity government in February 2020. Minister Justice Ruben Madol Arol presented the bill to Parliament yesterday, and that is the end of some of the news items that we have from across the continent. And so, very well, just a few stories before we get into the main headline there. All right, I know it's a lot of bad news. I should not even be laughing this afternoon, but anyway. Of course, the victims of the people who were murdered over the weekend were buried yesterday there in Nigeria. Pretty sad what is happening there. And I think what I found to be interesting today, this news from Nigeria showing that now Nigeria has signed a deal, and the European Union is strengthening relations with Nigeria as it seeks to diversify sources of its natural gas imports in an attempt to reduce reliance on Russian energy. This very same country that this product sometimes is not even sufficient for its own people. And also, this could be a great source of income from, for Nigeria. So this same project that is never enough, in form of supply to Nigerians. Now Nigeria is coming out and saying, actually, we do have more than enough. And the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation chief executive assured the European delegation that the company was keen on increasing gas supply to the global market. All right, and that Nigerian authorities say the country has a proven natural gas reserve of 209.5 trillion cubic feet as of January 2020. So this could be a great revenue for Nigeria, because revenue from oil and gas account for about 2/3 of Nigeria's funding, which I think is a good thing. This is a new market for Nigeria, but we also know that the same sector has been plagued with a lot of corruption. So as much as Nigeria benefits from this, and even could benefit more if they get rid of corruption and there are proper structures of accountability and how much the country is making, from this oil and gas. It will be nice. The same country that produces so much of this, and Nigeria is the 4th biggest liquefied natural gas supplier to Europe. At least 40% of Nigeria's gas is currently exported to Europe. Can you imagine? And Nigeria is the country with the biggest, with the highest poverty index. Did you know that? Yeah, the most populous country in Africa. So this goes to show how perhaps, a poor leadership can do to a country. Nigeria is not a poor country. Nigeria is rich in its natural resources. Nigeria, its people are hardworking and all that. But it's just the lack of proper governance and lack of leadership that we see, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. And we have leaders in place who don't have a good will and who are not there to serve the people, but are there to enrich themselves. That's why you find that even in my country here, somebody is elected as a member of parliament. Before they're elected, they didn't have much, but after they join politics and they have these positions, all of a sudden someone owes so much. They have immersed a lot of wealth in a very short time, because public offices are looked at as areas where you go to siphon public money and to steal and to enrich and not to serve the people. And when you look at the politics in places like the Western world, Europe or Australia, or these countries that are the first world countries, you'll find that the politicians they're the ones who will be riding bicycles in the streets with the people, will be taking the train with the people, will live a very normal life, because their politics is all about leadership, is all about policies, is all about the people, majority of the time. Okay, but in our continent, and I think this has been the biggest impediment on us progressing in terms of development as a people, because of the people who take up this leadership position. By the way, these leadership positions, we are the ones who vote for these people. So our criteria, because at the end of the day, we only get the leaders we deserve. We give them these positions. We vote them in because they speak my language, because they are from my clan, because they are from, and at the end of the day, they don't really qualify. We don't look at the actual qualifications, the merit. That I'll sit down and think, what, I'm going to vote for this person because I believe in their agenda. I believe in whatever it is that they're selling to me in terms of how much they would change my life. I wish we would just change, modes in which we look at how we elect our leaders, because that is where the problem starts. So now Nigeria wants to supply the European Union, and of course European Union now is scattered up there because of the problem with Russia and Ukraine, and they're shining away Russia's oil and gas. So now they're looking for new markets, and this will be a great place, and even at the beginning of this war, it was predicted that Africa could be the new frontier in terms of providing, Europe with oil and gas. And even as we speak, Italy already was in Algeria. But now the problem is when they come into the continent too much, what will happen? In areas where these countries have vested interest in terms of natural resources, the countries are always fighting. Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, even, Libya itself. the root cause was the oil and the natural resources that the country have. And we've seen the arguments and the back and forth between France and Italy. Italy, of course, calling out France over its role in the mess in Libya and back and forth. But at the end of the day, Libya used to be the leading seller of oil and gas to Italy, so that was messed up. So they're not making noise because they're concerned about the people of Libya and the state of the country and what is happening there and the humanitarian crisis. They're making noise because their interests have been touched, and they have been affected. They've been affected. So at the end of the day, this will be a good chance for us as a continent to make great use of this opportunity, but also this will be another chance, unfortunately, that we'll see corruption in tunes that we've never seen, and maybe even some, wars will start happening in countries that are relatively quiet, because where the natural resources and these other interests come in, that usually is the result. So unfortunately, but I hope that will not be the case. So now Nigeria, I will seek to make more revenue from its oil and gas. I don't know how Nigerians are feeling about this, because back at home, they don't even have enough of that. But the government is saying it has too much and in surplus that it can be selling out there. It's nice, because that has been at least, one of the leading incomes for Nigeria, it's oil and gas. So that's a nice thing. And South Sudan has started the process of constitutional making. And yesterday, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs submitted the constitution making process bill 2022 to the Transitional National Legislative Assembly. The bill is expected to provide, among other things, and establish a legal framework to govern the process of the permanent constitution-making process. South Sudan does not even have a constitution yet. Remember, when it had its independence in 2011, just 2 years later, plunged into a civil war that has continued and has not provided for a proper space where the country can do what it's supposed to be doing and the people can engage in ways that they should be engaging. And so they really do they have a working constitution, but they're starting the constitution process. And I think these are just some of the requirements of, of the revitalized peace agreement. So now it will also guarantee a good governance, constitutionalism, rule of law, human rights, and gender equality. However, the process has been delayed for quite a while now, since the signing and the formation of the unity government, remember, in February 2020. So I think, South Sudan, as much as we sit here and we call out the leadership and we complain, and with good reasons, but also lately it's been seeming to, as much as there are a lot of challenges, but they seem to be making progress, step by step. And I think that's a good thing, and we should encourage that, because at the end of the day, we all wish well for the country and the people of South Sudan. So small progress is being, at least there seems to be a resemblance of progress being made when you compare with a couple of years ago. So that is good. That is good. What is happening in South Sudan, it is promising. And maybe, just maybe, this peace that has been elusive might just come sooner than we expected if they continue with what they are doing and the progress, however small, that is being made there in South Sudan. So now let's look at the forgotten wars in the continent, and that one of them will be in South Sudan. Of course, not entirely forgotten. The Pope is planning to visit South Sudan, I think, in June. They've already, the Vatican already has had the logo, which will be used throughout this process out. I think they did that last month, and the Pope is expected to visit there in June. Maybe this visit will make a difference. The Pope visited South Sudan. Oh no, the leaders visited Vatican. Remember the spiritual retreat they had where the Pope was kissing their feet and all that stuff, and really besought them, beseeching these leaders to just do it for the country, to just get peace for the people. But even that was not very successful. So Pope is not giving up. So he's coming in person. That time they went to Rome, but this time the Pope is coming in person, and he wants to see what progress South Sudan is making as far as, achieving some of the set agendas and some of the set goals in line with the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. So this is another war that has not been given the much attention you would expect for it to be given, especially in the African Union. Recently, there were some bickering, and I think there's still some simmering tensions between the leadership, and nothing much is being done. Or maybe I think the people are just tired, and IGAD is tired, maybe the East African community is tired, and other countries outside, but we've seen every now and then the US speaking and giving warning and threatening sanctions, and maybe that whips these leaders back into a formation of progress, and so maybe that has bore this little progress that you're seeing right now. So that's a good thing, but that is a war that sometimes, in a conflict, that the world have forgotten that it even exists. Another conflict is that of the one that is I think still active in Ethiopia. Remember the Ethiopian Tigrayan War, and of course the ongoing civil war that began on the 3rd of November 2020 in the Tigrayan region of Ethiopia, when the local Tigrayan Defense Forces, the TPF, were fighting the Ethiopian National Defense Force. We've seen that war has taken different facets, and now we're staring at a human catastrophe happening there, abuses, rapes, the government blocking aid reaching that area, and that has been used as a weapon of war right now, and so many other things and reports that are being presented to the United Nations Security Council that really paints a grim picture of what is happening in Ethiopia right now. So that is also another war, that a conflict in Africa that has been forgotten, and I think this has to do thanks to the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and so nobody's thinking about the human rights abuses happening in Ethiopia right now. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's even, fine, the world could forget because of what is happening, but where is African Union? What are they doing? And to know that African Union headquarters is in Ethiopia, and the way African Union has handled this matter in Ethiopia is quite wanting. And I think that is just how African Union has been handling conflicts and other issues from across the continent in the similar fashion that they have handled the issue in the Ethiopian Tigrayan conflict. And so the African Union has not done much. IGAD, nothing much. And so this is also this is an active war happening still in Ethiopia that the world has forgotten about. So at the end of the day, when you look at how attention shifted during COVID, we saw how even countries that we thought were our partners were people we could rely on, and we saw how countries took a very nationalistic approach, even when it came to the distribution of the PPEs, of later on the vaccine. We saw at the end of the day, Africa, we were on our own. So perhaps a good lesson we could pick, because even right now, the world, the attention has shifted. Everybody's looking at what is happening in Ukraine and Russia. So nobody's really paying attention to the continent and what is happening in the continent. So perhaps the biggest takeaway that we should have in mind as a people here in Africa is that we do have ourselves to worry for ourselves. The end of the day, as much as some of these conflicts that continue to ravage the lives of people, that of between Cameroonian government and the Anglophone part in Cameroon, between the larger Nigeria and the Biafrans and all that. These are things that continue to happen, the conflicts that continue to happen in the continent, and it's only through us in the continent that we can find solutions to some of these conflicts. At the end of the day, we are by ourselves. So if we don't come out with the solutions for our issues, like Africans, for African issues, then we do have a problem. And it's very interesting, because I think that the motto for African Union, I think it's African solutions for African problems. Yeah, but how has that been working for us? Not so much. But I think it could be important, to approach issues in the continent with that mindset, because at the end of the day, we have ourselves to try to find solutions for whatever it is that is ailing the continent. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. All right, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you again here back tomorrow, God willing. Thank you for watching. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Bye-bye for now.
Viewers, those listening to this tape or this video, I want to bring to your attention that the politics of proxy wars in Africa is becoming real, and it has become a reality. I want to bring to the attention of the African states that time and time again we have fallen victims of proxy wars. We fight wars that are not ours. We fall in conflicts that are not supposed to be, don't help Africa, and they don't help our countries at all. The proxy war that is in East and Central and the Horn of Africa has been ignited, supported, equipped by France. It has been very real that the French government, quietly through its company called Total Oil, has been searching for resources around the triangle of East and Central Africa and Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. The LAPSET was one of them, which could have been a landmark project for the people of France. They withdrew from it. The Tanga to Mwanza, they made it, they withdrew from it. The search for oil and resources through Total Oil has brought us the dangers of a proxy war in the region. It is therefore very prudent for people of the region to understand the dynamics that we are going through. For example, in Rwanda and the Burundi conflict, there is a proxy war. We are fighting a proxy country. It has brought us to a war between the two countries, between Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi. There is a proxy war in Congo who is sponsoring a resurgence of rebels that are fighting President Tshisekedi because he was not supported by countries that we know very well. This type of strategy has happened in North Africa, where Libya has been reduced to rebels, where each faction, even the government supported by United Nations, is being bombarded by a rebel called Khalifa Haftar, who is funded by countries that we know. The question of Somalia and the Kenyan maritime presents a challenge, a testy case for Africa and East Africa to stand firm and denounce the actions of countries that bring proxy wars and proxy politics in our region. It is therefore my humble submission that for this conflict, for this to end, we must do enough publicity, advocacy around the area to tell and explain to the international community why this problem is going to create an imbalance in the peace in the region, and the regional peace will be affected. It is therefore my humble submission that as a Ugandan whose troops, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers of other many millions Ugandans who are in Somalia, condemn any action by the Somali government to try to resolve issues that should have been resolved amicably as Africans within the African confines. I submit therefore that some of us will go a mile further to do now, from now onwards, to expose to show the challenges of these countries that make us fight a proxy war in Africa. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.